The last trip I made to the farm, and the very last trip right before the pandemic that effectively shut down our air travel and visits with family, I flew out in March 2019 to see my dad retire from the Office of Law, the employer he had all those years while we were young, and even after we had gone to Arizona. My dad had a retirement party, and I, his oldest daughter, went to celebrate with him. I stepped up to the mic that evening in a packed house of garrulous remembrances, guffawed and toasted by current and former coworkers, some of whom I remembered and some I didn't, but many of whom remembered me from when I was very young, from the years when we lived on the farm. I read my little poem to my dad and everyone about my memories of going to the Office of Law when we were young and thinking my daddy was so important and famous because he worked in a big office building in Ellicott City and had a secretary, Irma, and all the serious people with eyes that smiled for Paul's girls fussed as we shuffled in, asking about us like we too were famous, and I talked about knowing that even after my mom and sisters and I had gone, that I took some comfort in knowing my dad still had the Office of Law with all the kind, smiling people who loved him and came all this way on a Friday afternoon after having retired themselves years ago to eat artichoke dip and pay for their own drinks and celebrate my father. The man who after all these years could still laugh so uproariously, though there was behind that smile a whole veil of unwashed tears for the girls he lost. When I went back to Maryland that March, I asked my father to take me back to the farm. Like always, he said yes, conceding the drive and whatever old ghosts it would stir up in him. Now he lives fairly far from the farm, at least an hour's drive, so it was winding down country roads, a kind of drab and barren feeling in early spring, though a brisk freshness in the air. One of the things I'll always be grateful for was finding the snowdrops, those small, slender white flowers so close to the ground that I found in the old garden, overgrown and nearly unrecognizable. But the snowdrops were still coming up in the same little spot so many years later. The farm was almost macabre with the wear of the years, layers upon layers, like makeup on an old face in a grotesque effort to pile on and cover up. There's no other way to say it. The people had become hoarders. If it's the same folks who bought the place out of the wreckage of my parents' marriage, the same ambitious couple with young kids who, for the first several years, had even bigger plans than my mother. They put on a massive new addition after razing the summer kitchen to the ground, that creepy two-story rat trap with the rotting linoleum floors and the questionable curving stairs to the cramped second story, where inexplicably my mother saved all the original boxes from our old Santa gifts. With the summer kitchen turned to rubble, they could build that annex in its place, colonial blue paint covering over the basic brown of my mom's folksy attempt to convey Lincoln logs. They added a pond, kept bees and goats and chickens, tried to resurrect the idea of a working farm, something even my mother had never tried. And for a while it seemed maybe the new owners had bested my mother, had found an even more platonic form than her original discovery, achieved not by pulling away layers and revealing the origins as she had done, but rather by piling on exterior dimensions and expanding beyond the original bones of the operation. But now, as I stood on once beloved land that had been such a lodestar to waking dreams and spirit walks, picking and sniffing this or that flower, lifting this small warty brown toad, mashing that handful of black raspberries to my lips, hugging the trunk of a darling old tree, all of it, blasted and reeking now, a Hieronymus Bosch nightmare. Piles upon piles of trash and flotsam had been collected and stuffed into every cranny of the still standing and newly added outbuildings, a strange avalanche of objects and obsessive repetitions. Who needs 100 rusted metal gas cans? A new barn added in the back field, brimming to the ceiling, it seemed, with refuse. The playhouse my grandfather painstakingly redesigned one summer, now jammed full of bulging plastic bags filled with who knows what all junk. The spacious groundhog hole field now gorged with old military equipment, tanks and trucks and rusted roll-offs and mayhem of scrap metal, all hunkered in a cold drizzle under tarps and plastic sheeting, shrouds over long-dead projects. Was this the county dump? How had all this stuff even gotten here? All I could think about was how much time it would take to remove all this garbage from the land. That would take years and years if we started right now. One solace I could find, aside from snowdrops, was the old cherry tree, still growing near the front door of the house, now seemingly closer thanks to another addition, But it was still my same old cherry tree just beside the rock wall, the wall my parents had built despite disagreements and bickering as they laid each stone, still standing now, glazed with rime and rain. I am still hugging the tree, my old friend. All trees are friends, but this one is like my sister. You used to feed me cherries, little blood-stained placentas of juice filled with small seed babies. I mouthed each brown cherry stone, and when all the flesh was stripped along my teeth, I would rat-a-tat the stone, planting another tree maybe, my lips stained crimson, my belly full of fruit. Old cherry tree, you friend, you mother of my once days. I longed for you then and now and always. What we shared in my mind was a gift I can never unsee. All the times your sheltering branches dropped their stains onto my story, you marked us with your touch. We parked the car under you, the car we eventually drove all the way across the country to a new home, leaving you in this place. For a moment I have returned home, befuddled by time, staring about amazed, a 40-year-old girl standing beside her father, just retired from the one job he held his whole life, hired just before I was born. Here we are, remembering the life we had, the strange ghosts of us, sucking on the old fruit and ruminating. And now, during a pandemic, I have ended up here, downtown on a break, in Tucson, standing under another tree, smiling up at a new friend, her ancestors from Peru, and I am wearing a purple poncho, an echo of handiwork by indigenous people from her homeland. A bemused codger waits on someone in the city court and tries to form the words to name the hilarity he feels watching Maria Luisa climbing up into a young palo verde on our lunch break, trying to find a youthful version of herself who lives inside her, the way the old farm still lives in me so fiercely. As she climbs, I'm trying to explain what and why and how it all had a hold on me and still does. I'm listening, she says. Go on. And as the old man calls out, "Hey, you!" I try once more to begin my story, to say it right, say it true, the pit turning in my mouth.